You might know that YMYL stands for Your Money, Your Life, but how many niches and topics are included in that expression? And how do you know exactly when you're entering into YMYL territory? That's what we're going to uncover in today's video. Hi, my name is Morten Storgard and welcome to Authority Site Geek. On this channel we talk about everything you need to know to rank your authority site and get a ton of traffic from Google and other places to grow your passive income. In today's video we're talking about YMYL sites because Google has slammed a ton of websites over the last couple of years. So it's really important to understand what YMYL means and when you're entering into this dangerous territory. These are typically topics and pages that talk about people's safety or financial situations, but it's much more than that, as we're going to look at. Google has been updating their quality rater guidelines. This is where you find all this information. So the list has been expanding quite a lot recently. So let's start by taking a quick look at what they tell us in these guidelines. So now the list looks something like this. They included news and current events, government related stuff, law, finance. That's an old one that's been there all the time. And now shopping has been crawling onto the list. And this is a really big one because this impacts everybody who's doing e-commerce or people doing drop shipping and so on. It's also health and fitness. It's also nutrition. So this includes recipes. I've seen a ton of mom bloggers get slammed on the AdThrive forum. AdThrive is one of the premium ad networks that I use. And by being a part of AdThrive, I get access to a Facebook group with a ton of bloggers. And there's a lot of mom bloggers on that network. And I see them complaining all the time about losing traffic because of this. So the next up is safety. This is also huge, as you can imagine. We also see the list expanding into something they call groups of people. So this is websites that do claims related to race, gender, religion, age, nationality, gender, and so on. You know, anything that people can be offended by. It's also information about finding a job, choosing a college, and housing information. So as you can see, Google has been expanding the list quite substantially. I think this list will just keep expanding and growing over time. So moving forward, you need to either be an authority on your topic or you need to stay clear of these topics altogether. And by being an authority, we mean something down the line, getting an education in the field, getting certified. So I put together some great questions you need to ask yourself before you choose a topic for your website. So the first question you need to think about is, can you be an expert in this field? This is important because Google needs to be able to identify experts in order to know if this guy is an expert and this guy is not an expert. So if there's no certification, there's no education you can take, if you cannot hold any sort of PhD about it, you're probably doing just fine. And here you can also think about, would you prefer yourself to talk to an expert about the topic you're going to write about? If so, you should probably stay away from it if that expert would typically hold a long education or a specialized certification of some sort. So here you're typically doing just fine if you're writing about hobbies, stuff that's not dangerous, that doesn't impact your health in any way, like tutorials and how-to guides and, you know, everyday information about pets and so on. The next question you should ask yourself is, could this be viewed as dangerous? You might not think that parachuting or MMA fighting is dangerous, but maybe your mom thinks. So what would your mom think? What would all your friends think? If it could be perceived as dangerous, there's a big possibility that down the line Google would include it in the YMYL topics. The next thing up is, does this niche require a big investment for your audience? So if you're talking about golfing, you're doing just fine. But if you're giving general advice on how to buy a house, that's already included in the list. So what about other big purchases like luxury items or getting a motorbike, you know, stuff like that. So buying advice and something relating to e-commerce and buying stuff that's really expensive, then you really need to think twice before you go into the category, especially if you can be able to pinpoint experts in the field. Who knows, maybe next up to be included in the YMYL list is buying guides for cars, luxury items, and so on. So the next one is really weird. Could this potentially affect the future happiness of your readers? Google recently included this Some types of pages and topics could potentially impact a person's future happiness, health, financial stability, or safety. We call such pages your money or your life pages, or YMYL for short. So see, this is tricky because what can impact the future happiness of anybody? That could be anything, you know, it's so subjective and it's really hard to quantify and measure what that is. So maybe we're talking about marriage counseling, maybe we're talking about couples advice where you would prefer to talk to a real psychologist or at least have someone with a certification of some sort. The next question you should ask yourself is, could there be lawsuits involved if you start talking about these topics? So of course you can get sued for anything and everything. But if you're talking about advice about kids or driving and stuff like that, you need to think twice. So the last question I included on the list is, would you trust your neighbor's advice on this topic? You would probably take your neighbor's advice on how to start your car on a winter morning, but how about fixing a trampoline for your kids? What if there's some risk or could be some perceived risk involved with it? So how about if you wanted to build a zip line in your garden? Would you trust your neighbor? Would you only ask your neighbor who's an engineer, or would you take anybody's advice? So you see, things get blurry and it's really hard to figure out where the line is, and it's moving all the time. So before you start panicking, I just want to say, calm down, you're probably fine. None of my sites have been hit so far with the YMYL updates, and I have like 7-8 sites I think at the moment. And the topics are all over the place. And there's definitely some information here and there that crosses into the YMYL space. So here's what I'm doing to future-proof my websites. I'm trying to establish authority, trust, and expertise on all the topics I talk about. To some extent. There's a ton of ways you can do this. You can try to get mentioned on other people's websites, especially on authoritative websites in your industry. And you also need to make sure that you get quoted and have your name mentioned together with some advice that people picked from your website and stuff like that. And if you want to learn more about that, stay tuned on this channel and make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell button so you'll know when I put out new content.